The allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in...
William did not raise his voice at first. That made the moment even more dangerous. A message placed before him carried a claim nobody inside the palace expected to see again. Meghan was attempting to re-enter royal life by invoking a title tied directly to Diana. Within minutes, the prince's restraint disappeared. What looked like a dispute over words had suddenly become something far more personal. A battle over Diana's legacy, William's authority, and the boundaries of the monarchy itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William read the paragraph twice during a restricted morning briefing, then placed the paper flat before him. Meghan had submitted a formal request seeking recognition through the fictional designation Princess Henry of Wales in Diana's historic family tradition, arguing that her marriage to Harry offered a path back into ceremonial royal standing. A ceremonial role, in plain terms, means an official place at selected royal events without restoring full working duties. The wording struck deeper because Catherine now carries the title Princess of Wales, making any deliberate link to Diana personal and politically explosive. The prince looked at the senior aide and asked one quiet question. Why was his mother's name being used to justify Meghan's return? Nobody answered immediately. Harry was caught between two loyalties, because Meghan viewed the request as a way to restore dignity she believed had been taken from her, while William saw the Diana connection as a boundary no family dispute should cross. The silence hardened when the aide explained that the request did more than seek recognition. It also asked palace officials to acknowledge Meghan at selected future events, using language that could associate her position with Diana's royal identity. William's anger sharpened when a documented internal briefing showed that the strongest wording had been deliberately preserved because rejecting it would place the palace under public pressure. He ordered the request frozen and demanded to know who had shaped the final language. The answer mattered because this was no longer a disagreement. It touched Catherine's present role, Diana's memory, and Harry's place between his wife and his brother. William closed the folder, pushed his chair backward, and told the room that nobody was to answer Meghan until he had spoken directly with Harry. Then he asked for his brother's name to be placed first on the call sheet. But William's anger was only one side of the crisis, because behind Meghan's extraordinary demand stood three people carrying three completely different memories of Diana, and one of them was about to feel personally betrayed. For William, this was never simply about protocol. For Harry, it was never simply about Meghan. Diana belonged to both brothers, but grief had taught them to protect her memory in radically different ways. Now one title had dragged that old wound directly into their present lives. Meghan believed Diana represented resistance against an unforgiving institution. William believed his mother's legacy was being turned into leverage. Neither interpretation left much room for compromise. William understood why the wording cut so deeply. Catherine now carried the title Princess of Wales, a royal position historically associated most powerfully in modern memory with Diana, while George stood directly in the future line of succession, the order determining who inherits the crown. That made Meghan's request more than symbolic. To him, it risked blurring Diana's history, Catherine's present role, and George's future inside one emotionally charged argument. Meghan saw the same history differently. She believed her own struggle with royal life echoed the isolation Diana once described, and she viewed that connection as something morally meaningful, rather than something calculated. Harry read the final request alone, and stopped when he reached the sentence linking Meghan's desired recognition to his mother. He supported his wife's demand for dignity. He understood why she wanted the palace to acknowledge that leaving working royal life had not erased her connection to the family. But he also knew William. He knew exactly how his brother would hear those words. Not as history, not as symbolism, as an attempt to use their mother's name to reopen a door the monarchy had already closed. Catherine learned the details directly from William, rather than through an aide. She listened while he described the request, then asked him something he was not prepared to answer. Was Diana's title now going to become another weapon between the brothers? The prince fell silent. Catherine did not defend Meghan's wording, but she warned him that anger could turn a dispute over recognition into another permanent fracture with Harry. William knew she was right, yet he could not shake the feeling that one sacred boundary had already been crossed. Harry finally admitted, during a private recorded call with his brother, that he knew Meghan wanted renewed ceremonial recognition, but he insisted he had never approved the strongest Diana-linked wording. Meghan refused to remove it. She argued privately that Diana's story belonged to history, not exclusively to William, and that avoiding the comparison only protected the palace from uncomfortable truths. Harry ended the call shaken, reread the disputed sentence on his phone, deleted a message 3 times, then finally sent Meghan only 4 words: "We need to talk." William, meanwhile, had begun asking a different question. When had this idea started? The answer led away from the palace and back several months, to a private gathering where one seemingly harmless remark about Diana had changed everything. That conversation might have remained a family disagreement, if the idea had truly begun with Meghan. But months earlier, somebody else had planted the seed. The crisis did not begin 4 minutes ago. It began months earlier, with one sentence spoken in a room where nobody expected it to matter. Meghan remembered it. Harry dismissed it. The palace never knew it had been said, but that private exchange changed the way she viewed her position forever. What sounded like historical trivia became a strategy, then a grievance, then a demand. By the time William saw the wording, the argument had already been quietly growing for months. Meghan had been attending a private heritage dinner in California when a retired constitutional researcher began discussing the way royal women had historically become associated with titles and styles through marriage, inheritance, convention, and public use. A royal style, in simple terms, is the formal way a member of the family is addressed or identified. The researcher then made the remark that changed everything. Diana had become such a powerful public figure that her identity eventually carried emotional weight far beyond whatever the palace preferred. Meghan immediately asked whether historic naming conventions could ever be revived symbolically. Harry heard the question and treated it as curiosity. She did not. Harry forgot the conversation within days, but Meghan returned to it. She asked a private advisor to prepare a documented historical briefing covering Diana's titles, her marriage, and the terminology connected to Harry's position at birth. At first, the exercise seemed academic. Then the language changed. Meghan began describing the idea as a correction of history, arguing that leaving official royal duties had not erased her connection to the family or to the woman whose story had shaped Harry's life. He became uneasy because he knew William would never hear that argument as abstract history. Harry finally challenged her after reading an early draft. He warned that attaching herself directly to Diana would feel personal to his brother, not constitutional. Meghan pushed back. She believed he was asking her to surrender the strongest symbol available to explain the rejection and isolation she felt they had endured. Their disagreement stopped being about titles. It became an argument over pain itself, whose suffering was recognized, whose story mattered, and who was allowed to invoke Diana when making that case. Meghan closed the historical briefing after Harry read the most aggressive passage. It linked her desired future ceremonial role to Diana's position within the House of Windsor, the royal family's formal dynastic house, and argued that public association could not simply be erased when palace duties ended. Harry looked at her and said quietly, "William will hear this as you taking something from Mum." Meghan answered that nothing belonging to history could be owned by one person. William eventually learned about that dinner through a documented internal account, including the exact question Meghan had asked months earlier. His anger changed immediately. This had not been spontaneous. It had been building. Once he understood that Diana's name had entered the plan long before the request reached Britain, he no longer wanted another memo. He wanted Meghan and Harry face to face. William entered the conversation determined to stay controlled. That discipline lasted until Diana's name was spoken. Meghan defended the request. Harry tried to stop the argument from becoming personal. Catherine remained outside the exchange entirely. But years of mistrust were suddenly compressed into one brutal question. Did Meghan have the right to use Diana's identity as a pathway back toward royal recognition? William's answer came without hesitation, and it stunned both of them. William had arranged the private video call without palace advisors, legal staff, or communications teams. He wanted nobody hiding behind prepared wording. Royal recognition, in simple terms, meant the palace formally accepting how a person was presented at official events and in institutional communication. The prince made one distinction immediately. He was not trying to stop Harry or Meghan from speaking about Diana as family. His objection was narrower and far more personal. He would not accept her historic royal identity being used as justification for renewed ceremonial status. Meghan pushed back before Harry could soften the exchange. She told William that Diana did not belong exclusively to him, and reminded him that Harry carried the same grief, the same history, and the same emotional inheritance. William did not deny it. He said that was exactly the point. Memory could be shared. Grief could be shared. But emotional inheritance, he argued, could not simply be converted into institutional authority. Meghan heard that as control. William saw it as protection. Harry finally intervened when the prince accused the request of placing Meghan beside Diana for strategic effect. He defended his wife and warned his brother not to reduce every painful argument to manipulation. Then William asked the one question Harry had been hoping to avoid. Had he personally approved the exact Diana-linked wording? The hesitation answered more than the words that followed. Meghan broke the silence herself. She confirmed that Harry had suggested weakening the comparison, but she had insisted it remain. The prince's anger changed instantly. The strongest language could no longer be blamed on advisors or misunderstood drafts. William leaned forward, removed his glasses, and told her slowly that his mother's suffering would not become a pass back through the palace gates. Harry immediately told him he had gone too far. William did not retreat. He revealed that palace staff had already been instructed that no royal communication would recognize the disputed formulation. Meghan answered just as firmly. The palace, she said, might control official recognition, but it could not control what the public chose to call her, or how Diana's legacy lived beyond palace walls. The confrontation ended there, but the weakness in William's position was now exposed. He could freeze recognition inside the institution. He could not automatically stop the phrase from taking on a life outside it. And that meant the next battle would no longer be only emotional. It would be about power. The shouting stopped. The machinery began. Behind closed doors, the question became colder and more dangerous. Who actually decides what a royal person may call themselves? William possessed enormous influence inside the family. But tradition, law, courtesy styles, public language, and palace recognition were not the same thing. Meghan had found the narrow space between them. And while officials examined every word, Charles faced a choice no father wanted: whether to intervene between his sons once again. Charles received the briefing alone and read it without speaking. Palace recognition meant the monarchy formally accepting how someone was described in official communications and royal events, while a courtesy style was simply a form of address connected to status or family position, rather than a new power in itself. That distinction mattered, because Meghan could not create an official role merely through public usage. But neither could William control every phrase spoken outside royal channels. The king placed the page beside him and asked one exhausted question. Why was Diana once again at the center of a conflict between his sons? William wanted certainty. He argued in a documented palace consultation that the disputed wording had to be rejected clearly, because any hesitation could later be presented as quiet acceptance. His practical authority rested in the areas the monarchy could actually control: invitations, court communications, ceremonial access, and recognition at official functions. The prince did not claim he could erase language used elsewhere. He wanted to make sure nobody could confuse public repetition with palace approval. Charles understood that logic, but he also understood Harry. He knew his younger son's attachment to Diana was not strategic. It was grief, memory, and identity tied together. Yet the monarch also believed using her historic position to reopen Meghan's route into institutional life would deepen the rupture instead of healing it. Charles warned William that a rejection written in anger could make the monarchy look less like it was protecting boundaries and more like it was punishing Meghan personally. William resisted at first. He believed softness would invite another challenge. Charles pushed back. He wanted a line that was firm enough to settle the question without turning the family dispute into a public act of revenge. Palace advisors then proposed the compromise. Meghan could continue to be acknowledged only through existing recognized styles, while any wording designed to suggest a Diana-linked ceremonial position would be rejected outright. Charles approved it. The king signed the response, paused with the pen still in his hand, and told an aide to warn Harry before anything left the palace. Then the aide looked down at his phone. The first headline had already appeared. Charles did not move. William immediately understood what that meant. The palace had finally chosen its position, but Harry was about to discover it from a screen before he heard it from his father, and that humiliation would trigger the first real fallout. Harry learned the decision in the worst possible way. Not through Charles, not through William, not even through an aide. His phone lit up with a headline announcing that the palace had rejected any attempt to connect Meghan's future royal status with Diana's title. He stared at it before Meghan knew what had happened. In that instant, the argument stopped being constitutional. To Harry, it became another deeply familiar wound. The institution had spoken publicly before the family had spoken privately. Harry read the palace clarification twice. It stated that no new ceremonial status or Diana-associated designation had been approved for Meghan. Ceremonial status, in simple terms, meant an officially recognized place or role at selected royal events without restoring full working duties. The wording was narrow, but the effect was immediate. 2 future family-linked invitations already being considered were quietly placed under review because staff feared Meghan's presence could now be interpreted as proof that her disputed claim had somehow been accepted. Harry called Charles almost immediately. His anger was controlled at first, but it broke when he asked why strangers had learned the decision before his own son had been warned. The king explained that a leak had outrun the planned notification, and insisted he had ordered an aide to contact him first. Harry heard the explanation, but it did not repair the damage. To him, the sequence mattered because it revived the old feeling that palace procedure could move faster than family loyalty. Meghan took the statement even harder. She told Harry that withdrawing the disputed wording now would look like surrender, as though William had frightened them into retreat. She believed the public rejection was designed to humiliate her before she had even been allowed to answer. Harry tried to calm her, but then another documented palace account reached him. William had requested a complete freeze on the proposal hours before Charles approved the narrower response. That detail changed his mood. He began to suspect his brother had wanted the strongest rejection possible from the beginning. Catherine saw the danger from the other side. In a private conversation with William, she warned him not to turn institutional victory into personal punishment. She understood why he wanted to protect Diana's legacy, but she told the prince that if the dispute ended with Harry feeling publicly cornered, the brothers might lose whatever remained between them. William resisted, then finally agreed to one last conversation. Harry ended the call with Charles, placed his phone face down, and told Meghan he needed to speak to William alone. No wives, no aides, no lawyers. She understood immediately. For the first time since the crisis began, the two brothers were about to confront the one thing no palace statement could settle: what Diana still meant to each of them, when nobody else was listening. No advisors joined them. No statement was being drafted. No cameras waited outside. William and Harry finally spoke as Diana's sons rather than opposing sides in a royal dispute. The anger was still there, but stripped of staff, titles, and public strategy, something else surfaced beneath it: grief. William believed Meghan's request turned their mother into leverage. Harry believed the palace had spent years controlling who was permitted to invoke her memory. Neither brother could dismiss the other completely. William spoke first and made one distinction he believed had been lost in the noise. Diana's memory, he said, could never belong to one son alone. Harry had every right to speak about her, remember her, defend her, and explain how her life shaped his own choices. But palace recognition, the institution formally accepting a title or position in its official dealings, was different. The prince argued that personal memory could be shared without turning their mother's historic royal identity into a route toward renewed status. Harry did not immediately disagree. Instead, he admitted something he had not said clearly before. He had warned Meghan that the wording would hurt William. He knew the Diana comparison would strike his brother as deeply personal, yet he had stayed quiet when she insisted on keeping it. The reason was painful. Challenging Meghan at that moment had felt to him like siding with the institution against his wife during another dispute over whether they still belonged. Harry had tried to avoid choosing between them, but his silence had helped create exactly that choice. William finally admitted his own weakness. His first reaction had not come only from duty or protocol. It had come from grief. Seeing Diana's name inside a request about royal standing made him feel as though their mother had been dragged into an argument she could no longer answer for herself. The prince acknowledged that his fury had made him speak as if he alone could defend her memory. Harry heard that admission differently from every palace statement that had come before it. Harry then revealed, in the private conversation between the brothers, that he had never wanted Meghan formally styled through Diana's legacy. What he wanted was recognition that stepping away from working royal duties had not erased their connection to the family. William listened. Then he offered the narrowest peace possible. He would never challenge Harry or Meghan for speaking personally about Diana, but the palace rejection of the disputed ceremonial wording would remain permanent. Silence followed. William finally said, "She was your mother too." Harry answered, "That's all I needed you to say." Neither brother fully apologized. Neither erased the damage. But Harry accepted the boundary, leaving Meghan with a decision of her own, just as public attention reached its highest point. The brothers had finally found one line they could both live with. Outside that private conversation, however, Britain was already turning the forbidden title into a national argument. By morning, a private family wound had become public spectacle. Diana's name dominated broadcasts, front pages, phone screens, and conversations outside royal gates. Some saw Meghan's move as audacious. Others saw the palace reaction as defensive. But the strongest emotion was discomfort. People understood instinctively that Diana occupied a unique place in British memory, and the sight of her legacy becoming ammunition in another Windsor battle produced something more complicated than ordinary royal gossip. Broadcasters spent hours separating three ideas that had become tangled together. Diana's historic title belonged to a very different moment in royal history. Catherine now carried the position of Princess of Wales, and Meghan's disputed request sought ceremonial recognition through language linked to the late princess. Ceremonial recognition, in simple terms, meant being formally acknowledged in selected royal settings, without returning as a full working member of the monarchy. Palace officials refused to expand their statement because every new sentence risked deepening comparisons among Meghan, Catherine, and Diana. Meghan watched the coverage grow more uncomfortable by the hour. Television panels repeatedly placed her name beside Diana's, but the original argument she wanted to make about belonging was disappearing beneath the controversy. Harry noticed it too. What had begun as a claim about recognition was now being reduced to a fight over a dead woman's identity. Meghan had wanted the comparison to explain pain. Instead, it was beginning to consume everything around it. William saw the same coverage and felt no victory. Catherine noticed the change almost immediately. His anger had faded, replaced by unease that defending his mother had once again helped turn her into headline material. The prince had wanted a boundary. He had not wanted another national spectacle built around Diana's suffering. Catherine told him privately that winning the institutional argument would mean very little if the family destroyed the meaning behind it. Outside Kensington Palace, the mood became painfully clear. A small crowd gathered near the gates, long associated with public mourning for Diana, and one woman held a handwritten sign that read, "Diana was a person, not a title." The image quickly became the defining television moment of the day. It stripped away the legal language, the palace strategy, and the royal rivalry. Suddenly, the argument looked less like a battle over status and more like a fight over memory. Harry finally told Meghan what he had agreed with William in their private conversation. He had accepted the boundary. At first, she felt betrayed. Then he explained that rejecting institutional use of Diana's title did not mean surrendering their right to speak about her personally. Meghan turned off the television and sat silently beside him. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Would continuing the fight protect Diana's legacy, or simply consume it? For the first time, the question was no longer whether Meghan could force the title through. It was whether winning the argument was worth what the argument had become. Meghan finally made the decision nobody expected when the confrontation began. She withdrew the Diana-linked wording. William did not celebrate. Harry did not declare victory. Charles issued no triumphant statement. The crisis ended quietly, because everyone involved had finally understood the same painful truth. Diana's memory had become too powerful, too personal, and too wounded to carry the weight of another battle over royal belonging. What began as an attempt to reclaim status ended by exposing something much deeper about the family she left behind. Meghan formally withdrew the request, seeking ceremonial recognition through any wording connected to Diana's historic royal identity. Ceremonial recognition, in simple terms, meant official acknowledgement at selected royal occasions, without restoring full working duties. Her existing recognized form of address remained unchanged, and the palace privately confirmed that no Diana-linked designation would be used for her at future royal events. The institutional argument was over. Meghan still believed the monarchy had treated her unfairly, but she also accepted something harder. Attaching her fight for recognition directly to Diana had swallowed the larger argument she wanted people to hear. Harry understood the decision differently. He stood beside Meghan without pretending the conflict had never happened. But he no longer believed defending his wife required him to reject William's boundary. His private conversation with his brother had changed that. Harry could support Meghan's pain while also protecting the memory of his mother from becoming a tool in another royal struggle. For the first time in the entire dispute, loyalty no longer demanded that he choose one person against another. William received confirmation through a documented private palace message. He read it, set his phone down, and remained silent for several seconds. Catherine waited. Finally, the prince said only, "It's finished." There was no smile. He understood that fury had almost pushed him into acting as though Diana's memory belonged to him alone. His boundary remained firm, but his conversation with Harry had restored something more important than victory. Beneath every title and every grievance, they were still both her sons. Charles felt relief rather than triumph. The king had wanted the conflict contained without another public humiliation, and Catherine wanted the same. She also understood more clearly than before that being Princess of Wales carried emotional history far beyond ceremony. Neither pushed for punishment. Neither wanted another statement. The family had already paid enough, and that was the real verdict. Meghan did not reclaim a place through Diana. William did not gain ownership over his mother's memory. Harry did not have to choose which person he loved more. The forbidden title disappeared, but the confrontation forced the family to draw a boundary it had avoided for years. Diana could remain their memory, their grief, and their inspiration, but never again their weapon. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.